Andrew Huberman 是史丹佛大学医学院神经生物学教授，但他更为人知的一面是时常在网路上对公众进行科普，用深入浅出的方式教大家如何从行为面、营养面、补给品面去改善生活。截至目前为止，他的 YouTube 频道有超过500万订阅，他本人时常一个人就讲2个多小时的 podcast。为了减轻大家的负担以及在中文圈推广 Huberman 的各种心法， Life Kaizen 将为大家把英语圈的生活改善新知定期以超浓缩加画重点的形式制作成影片，供各位朋友参考及分享。您的支持是我持续做这个节目的动力，喜欢的话请务必订阅、点赞、按小铃铛哦。
What were you just teaching me about mouth breathing and how it changes the shape of the face?
And so I arrived carrying a copy of the book Jaws. A Hidden Epidemic. This is not Jaws the shark. This book was written by my colleagues at Stanford, Sandra Kahn and Paul Ehrlich, and it has an introduction by Jared Diamond, who won a Pulitzer for Guns, Germs, and Steel, and a foreword by the great Robert Sapolsky, also a colleague of mine at Stanford. So 4 heavy hitters on this book, just to credential it first. This book centers around a couple of core concepts, but the first being that people, and in particular children, who overuse mouth breathing as opposed to nasal breathing, have changes in the structure of the face that, well, to be quite direct, makes them far more unattractive than if they were to mouth breathe. So that's the second point, that we want to chew hard. Chewing foods is essential to tooth and mouth and face development. These days, many children slurp their food. Many adults slurp their foods. Many adults are eating like babies. And of course, babies, before they develop their mature teeth, and even before they get all of their teeth in, need to obviously breast milk and, pudding-like foods. Okay, but so that's the second point. So nasal breathing, good. Mouth breathing, bad for craniofacial development. Chewing hard foods, chewing a lot on both sides of the mouth, great for craniofacial development, oral development, tooth development, and tooth health, which, by the way, are correlated with a number of other things like cardiovascular health and metabolic health. Very, very interesting links there. And then the third point is that the book argues that the entire field of orthodontia, things like braces, things like headgear, things like retainers, are the byproduct of poor breathing and, let's just say, overconsumption of soft foods in place of hard foods behavior. And so there's this guy who's from your side of the pond, Mew.
I like him already.
The Mew method of restoring normal craniofacial development. The book is chock-a-block full of impressive photos of before and afters. Impressive because in some cases you'll see kids that were mouth breathers or were eating a lot of soft foods, and then they recovered their behavior, so to speak, and became nose breathers. Of course, we have to mouth breathe when we're exercising really hard or when we're eating or speaking, we're going to mouth breathe. But at rest, we should nasal breathe is the argument. And that greatly improves craniofacial aesthetics. And the good news is this stuff is modifiable across the lifespan. And so the book isn't arguing for anyone to purchase anything.
Explain to me the mechanics of how the difference in whether you breathe through your nose or breathe through your mouth changes the shape of your face and head.
Yeah, well, and it goes beyond that. If you breathe through your mouth as opposed to your nose, first of all, you bring in less oxygen than you would if. So you're effectively putting yourself into a state of apnea, right? Which is bad during sleep, and guess what? It's bad during waking states also. You're getting less oxygen to your brain, bad. The sinuses, we hear my sinuses are clogged, or the sinuses, wish I had brought a skull with me, because one of the most impressive things about a skull, human skull being no exception, is that the sinuses are literally these little tubes or channels through which fluid and air can move. And the sinuses, even though they are essentially created by the fissures between different bones, so like there's two or three different bones that are interdigitated and create these tunnels, they're actually fairly plastic in the sense that they can be modified in terms of their shape. And so people will say, well, I have a deviated septum. Guess what? You should try and emphasize breathing through both nostrils in order to undeviate your septum. Now, if someone has a broken nose or something that's really structurally abnormal, they may need corrective surgery, but purely through deliberate nasal breathing. So it could be mouth taping at night, but also just deliberately nasal breathing during most of your cardiovascular training, unless you need to really, hit the gas, in which case mouth breathe, is going to help dilate the sinuses and lead to better airflow, which makes nasal breathing easier. The other thing is that nasal breathing, we know that nasal microbiome is particularly well suited to scrub or capture and destroy viruses, bacteria, and even some fungal infections. So in other words, when you're breathing in through your mouth, you're more susceptible to infections. This is important heading into winter as well. So there are a number of, we could talk about this for hours, but the point is nasal breathe when you can. Kids especially, but adults as well, chewing foods that require, eating foods that require some chewing and really working at it and chewing away. They have some impressive images in this book of kids that were twins that were raised separately, one by a group that eats a lot of let's just say tougher foods that require chewing versus one that's slurping their food. And one kid is literally incredibly attractive, perfect dentiture with no orthodontia or regular dentistry. And the other kid teeth is like snaggle. Wow. They have the horsey smile.
Even though they've got the same genetic predisposition.
Right. It's not a perfect experiment because there are other factors as well. And, none of this is, for better or worse, none of this is really amenable to kind of in laboratory type stuff. So these are naturally occurring experiments, as we say. There are also some very impressive images in the book, or we could say depressing, of kids that were pretty attractive as kids. And then there's an example of a kid who got a pet hamster. He was allergic to the hamster. He switched, as a consequence, he becomes a mouth breather. And then the characteristic change in the face when one overdoes mouth breathing is that the chin starts to move
recesses,
toward the neck. And the rest of the face goes out, but also the eyes become droopy. But as you say, why would the eyes be affected? It's not just musculature. What's happening is there's less use of literally the sinuses in the towards the upper mandible and up towards the eyes. Because if you ever had a sinus infection, it's painful up here in your forehead and around the eyes. So again, it's pretty straightforward. No products required. Chew your food well. Chew on both sides of your mouth, especially if you're a young person. But even if you're not, be a nasal breather. Really chew at your food and eat like an adult. I would say, one of the things is I don't know. Like to me, growing up, snack food was something that kids indulged in. Once you hit 18 or so, eat like an adult.